The airport terminal hummed with the chaotic energy of a holiday weekend, but the noise barely registered over the thumping in my chest. I stood at the check-in counter, my plastic folder neatly organized with our passports, printed itineraries, and hotel vouchers. I had spent weeks planning this family getaway to the Florida coast, paying for everything down to the premium seating. David, my son, stood a few yards away, scrolling on his phone with his headphones securely over his ears. Beside him, his wife Sarah adjusted her designer tote bag, looking everywhere but at me. I tried to hand a snack pack to my granddaughter Lily, but Sarah smoothly intercepted, pulling the little girl back by her shoulders. Stepping up to the counter, I handed my documents to the airline agent. She scanned my passport, frowned, and tapped rapidly on her keyboard. She tried again, her expression tightening. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the agent murmured, avoiding my eyes. "There is no reservation under Janet Richardson." I froze. I pointed to the printed confirmation code, the one I had paid for with my own credit card. The agent shook her head. The reservation had been modified last night. My name was removed. I turned around to look at my son, expecting him to be shocked. Instead, David didn't even glance up from his screen. Sarah was actively hiding a smirk behind her hand. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and opened the message from David. "The plane isn't for you, loser. Drag your suitcases to the train." I read the words 3 times. The ambient noise of the airport completely vanished, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I looked up. David was already walking toward the security checkpoint, Sarah trailing behind him, holding Lily's hand. The little girl waved at me over her shoulder. I didn't scream. I didn't chase after them demanding answers. I simply gripped the handle of my suitcase, turned my back on the security line, and walked toward the airport transit station. My mind was already calculating the next steps. The commuter train smelled faintly of stale coffee and damp wool. I rested my forehead against the cool glass window, watching the city blur into the suburban landscape. The ride back to my neighborhood usually took an hour, but today, time seemed to stretch endlessly. I didn't shed a single tear. Crying felt like a luxury I couldn't afford right now, a waste of energy on people who had just clearly demonstrated how little they valued me. My hands rested quietly on my lap, steady and still. The shock was already hardening into something much more useful clarity. When I finally unlocked the front door of my house, the heavy silence greeted me. David and Sarah lived just 20 minutes away, but they practically treated my home as their personal storage unit and free hotel. The entryway was cluttered with their muddy boots. I walked into the kitchen, the familiar hum of the refrigerator grounding me. There, stuck to the stainless steel door with a magnet, was a yellow sticky note. "Janet, don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning by Tuesday. And feed the cat. Sarah." It wasn't just the audacity of the request. It was the casual, entitled tone. They had planned this. They knew exactly what they were doing when they let me pack my bags, drive them to the airport, and stand at that counter. They wanted the vacation I paid for, but they didn't want the mother who funded it. I pulled the yellow note off the fridge, crumpled it into a tight ball, and tossed it into the trash can. I kicked off my shoes and walked into the living room. The throw pillows were scattered on the floor, left exactly where David had tossed them the night before. I didn't pick them up. For the first time in my life, the mess didn't bother me. A quiet realization settled over my shoulders. I was finally alone, and I was about to make sure it stayed that way. I headed straight for the oak desk in the corner of the room. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick, black, hardbound notebook. The edges were worn, and the cover had a faint coffee stain from 2 years ago. When my husband passed away, I started keeping this ledger to track my retirement expenses, ensuring I stayed within a safe budget. Over time, however, it had morphed into a silent, depressing record of every dollar I had funneled into my son's household. Sitting back in my chair, I clicked my pen and flipped to the most recent pages. The ink stared back at me, telling a story of ungrateful consumption. David's car, down payment $8,500. He claimed he needed a safer vehicle for Lily, though he ended up buying a sports sedan. Sarah's monthly meal prep delivery, $400. Lily's private preschool tuition, $1,200 a month. The emergency roof repair for their house, $5,000. I trailed my finger down the column of numbers. Restaurants' utility bills. They forgot to pay designer clothes Sarah deemed essential for her networking events. They didn't ask for help. They demanded it, framing it as my duty as a grandmother and a mother. I tallied up the last 12 months. The number at the bottom of the page made my stomach turn. I had handed over nearly $30,000 in a single year, draining the cushion my late husband had worked decades to build. I closed the notebook, pressing my palms flat against the cover. It wasn't the money that truly bothered me. It was the absolute lack of gratitude. They viewed me not as a mother, but as a walking ATM, a convenience they could discard at an airport terminal when they wanted privacy. I booted up my laptop and logged into my banking portal. The transactions matched my handwritten notes perfectly. I navigated to the credit card section. The card they were currently carrying in their wallets, the one David had memorized the numbers for, was directly linked to my primary account. I clicked on the card details, a small cold smile forming on my lips. The glow of the laptop screen illuminated the dark wood of my desk. I didn't need to make any dramatic phone calls or send angry texts. The tools to reclaim my life were right at my fingertips. I hovered the mouse cursor over the Authorized Users tab on my main credit card account. David's name sat right there, active and ready to swipe. I clicked Remove User. The page refreshed. He was gone. Next, I navigated to the auto-pay settings of my checking account. I scrolled down the list of scheduled transfers. There was the monthly payment for David's car lease. Cancel. There was the recurring transfer for Sarah's luxury gym membership. Cancel. I watched the green active icons turn gray one by one. The financial umbilical cord was officially severed. I picked up my phone and checked my messages. Nothing. Not a single text, checking to see if I made it home safely. They were likely 30,000 feet in the air, sipping complimentary beverages, completely oblivious to the fact that their unlimited funding had just evaporated. I returned to my email inbox, typing a specific keyword into the search bar. The confirmation email for their Florida vacation rental popped up instantly. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom beachfront property. I had booked it 3 months ago at Sarah's insistence, using my personal account on the rental platform and my primary credit card. David's name was listed as a guest, but the reservation, the liability, and the payment power belonged entirely to me. I opened the reservation dashboard. The cancellation policy was strict, but clear: cancel on the day of a check-in, and you forfeit the first night's fee, but the rest of the stay is fully refunded. I looked at the clock on the wall. They were scheduled to land in exactly 2 hours. I reached for my mouse, my hand steadier than it had been in years. The webpage prompted me with a brightly colored warning box. Are you sure you want to cancel this reservation? This action cannot be undone. I didn't hesitate. I clicked the red button. The screen spun for a few seconds before a green check mark appeared. Reservation canceled. Refund initiated. The luxury beachfront property, the one Sarah had been boasting about on her social media for weeks, vanished from my upcoming trips list. They were currently flying toward a house they had no right to enter, with a credit card that would decline the moment they tried to buy dinner. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long, deep breath. The tightness in my chest, a heavy weight I had carried since my husband died, began to lift. I wasn't acting out of petty revenge. I was simply enforcing the reality they had created. If I wasn't welcome on the plane, my money certainly wasn't welcome to fund their beachside cocktails. I closed the laptop and walked through my quiet house. Every room held traces of their intrusion. Sarah's expensive cosmetic bags cluttered the guest bathroom. David's golf clubs blocked the hallway closet. They had slowly colonized my space, pushing me into the corners of my own home. I pulled a stack of heavy-duty cardboard boxes from the garage. I started in the guest room, methodically packing away every item that didn't belong to me. I folded Sarah's clothes, placed David's electronics in a bin, and stacked Lily's toys neatly on top. I didn't throw anything away, nor did I damage their belongings. I just packed them, sealing each box with a loud rip of packing tape. By the time the sun began to set, the house was entirely mine again. The silence was no longer heavy. It was a protective shield. Early the next morning, I drove to the local hardware store. I didn't bother calling a locksmith to change the deadbolts. I was perfectly capable of using a screwdriver. I bought 3 new heavy-duty lock sets for the front, back, and side garage doors. Returning home, I spent the next 2 hours unscrewing the old hardware. The rhythmic turning of the screws felt incredibly therapeutic. David had held a key to this house since he was a teenager. He used it to walk in unannounced, usually heading straight for the refrigerator or the garage to borrow tools he never returned. That unrestricted access ended today. I aligned the new strike plates, tightened the bolts, and tested the new keys. The solid click of the new locks engaging echoed in the empty hallway, sounding like absolute freedom. Next, I dragged the 6 heavy cardboard boxes filled with their belongings out to the covered front porch. I stacked them neatly against the brick wall, safe from the weather, but clearly removed from my sanctuary. I went back inside, washed my hands, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I poured myself a mug and stood by the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood wake up. My phone, sitting on the granite counter, had been completely silent since yesterday. They had landed, probably picked up their rental car, and were undoubtedly heading straight toward the beachfront house. Right on cue, the phone screen lit up. It was David. The caller ID flashed brightly. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the warm liquid slide down my throat. I let it ring. It stopped, paused for 5 seconds, and started ringing again. Then came a call from Sarah. Then another from David. The panic had officially set in. I turned the phone on silent, slipped it into my pocket, and sat down at the kitchen table to enjoy my breakfast. By noon, my phone had accumulated 14 missed calls, 7 frantic text messages from David, and 3 lengthy, furious voice notes from Sarah. I sat on my back patio, enjoying the mild afternoon breeze, and finally unlocked my screen to read them. David's text started with confusion and quickly escalated. "Mom, why isn't the code working for the beach house?" "Mom, the host says the reservation was canceled. What did you do?" "My credit card just declined at the restaurant. Call me back now." Sarah's texts were less restrained. "Janet, this isn't funny. We are standing in the sun with Lily and our luggage. Fix the rental right now, or you're never seeing your granddaughter again." I didn't feel a spike of adrenaline. I didn't feel intimidated. I opened a new text message to David. I didn't type a long paragraph explaining my feelings. I didn't demand an apology for the airport. I simply attached a clear photograph of the black ledger page detailing the last 12 months of their expenses. Underneath the photo, I typed one sentence. "The Bank of Mom is closed. Have a safe trip home." I hit send. Then, using the settings menu on my phone, I activated the Do Not Disturb feature, specifically for their numbers. Their messages would go to a hidden folder, and their calls would go straight to voicemail without ringing. I wasn't blocking them entirely. I needed a record of their behavior, but I was removing their ability to disrupt my peace. I placed the phone face down on the patio table. For years, I had jumped at every notification, terrified of displeasing them, terrified of losing my connection to my family. But sitting there in the sunlight, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I had shed a heavy, ungrateful burden. My chest expanded as I took a deep breath of fresh air. 2 days passed without any direct confrontation, though my hidden voicemail folder was full. On Tuesday morning, I finally decided to listen to a few. David's tone had shifted from demanding to manipulative. He left a message holding the phone up to Lily, trying to coax the 4-year-old into asking why Grandma ruined their vacation. Hearing the child's confused little voice caused a brief pinch in my heart. But the anger at David, for using his daughter as a human shield, quickly overpowered it. I drafted a brief email to both David and Sarah. I love Lily dearly. When you are ready to facilitate a healthy relationship that doesn't involve my checkbook, you know where I live. The boxes containing the items you stored in my house are on the front porch. Please collect them by Friday, or I will donate them to the local charity center. I pressed send and immediately archived the thread. I wasn't going to engage in a back-and-forth debate. Boundaries are not negotiations. They are statements of fact. Later that afternoon, I was watering my front flower beds when my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, walked over to the fence. She was a sweet woman, though she loved neighborhood gossip. "Janet, dear," she leaned over the white pickets. "I was so surprised to see you home. Didn't David say you were moving into an assisted living facility soon? He told my husband last month he was getting ready to take over the property taxes here." I paused the watering can hovering over the hydrangeas. My grip tightened on the plastic handle. He had already been measuring the drapes, acting like my home was his inevitable inheritance, assuming I would just quietly fade into the background. "No, Helen." I smiled politely, my voice steady. David was mistaken. "I'm not going anywhere." I finished watering the flowers, my resolve hardening into solid steel. The next morning, I drove straight to my local bank branch. I didn't need a lawyer or a complicated legal trust to protect what was mine. I sat down with a personal banker, a young woman with a sharp suit and a professional smile, and handed over my identification. "I need to review all my accounts and update my beneficiaries," I instructed clearly. We went through the files one by one. I completely removed David's name from my checking and savings accounts. I revoked his status as a payable on death beneficiary. Then we opened my retirement portfolio and my life insurance policy. Where David's name had sat comfortably for a decade, I instructed the banker to remove him. "Who would you like to list as the primary beneficiary, Mrs. Richardson?" she asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Divide it completely. Half goes to a locked educational fund for my granddaughter Lily, which she cannot access until she turns 21. The other half goes to the local women's shelter downtown." The banker nodded, typing the information without asking questions. I signed the digital pads, confirming every change. Finally, I asked her to revoke David's access to my safety deposit box. Within 45 minutes, my financial legacy was entirely sealed off from his greed. I walked out of the bank with a stack of printed confirmations tucked securely into my purse. The sun felt warmer on my face. I hadn't filed any lawsuits. I hadn't called the police or set any complicated traps. I had simply exercised my absolute right to own my own life. I got back into my car, drove to the grocery store, and bought ingredients for a dinner I actually wanted to eat, without considering anyone else's dietary complaints. On Friday evening, a familiar SUV pulled aggressively into my driveway. I was sitting by the front window, reading a book, when David marched up the front steps. He ignored the stack of boxes on the porch and jammed his old brass key into the front door. I watched through the sheer curtain as he twisted the key. It didn't turn. He pulled it out, frowned, and shoved it back in, rattling the handle violently. I closed my book, stood up, and opened the inner wooden door, leaving the heavy glass storm door locked between us. David glared at me through the glass. "Are you kidding me, Mom? You changed the locks. Open the door." "Your boxes are right behind you, David," I replied evenly, my voice projecting clearly through the glass. "You ruined our vacation." We had to drive 16 hours straight back home. Sarah is furious. You are acting insane over a stupid joke at the airport. It wasn't a joke, David. It was the truth. The plane wasn't for me. I looked at him, really looked at him. A grown man throwing a tantrum on a porch because his free ride had stopped. Take your things. Do not come back uninvited. You can't do this, he yelled, striking his palm against the glass. You need us. No, I said quietly, stepping back into the foyer. I really don't. I turned around and walked back into my living room, ignoring his shouts. After 10 minutes of pacing, he finally grabbed the boxes, loaded them into his trunk, and drove away, tires squealing in frustration. I returned to my armchair and picked up my book. The house was perfectly quiet. There were no demands, no hidden insults, no passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. Just the steady ticking of the grandfather clock and the profound, peaceful weightlessness of a life finally lived on my own terms.